Welcome. What I want to do with you today is to share my screen with you on the Ideate map. So here we can see the Ideate map, and we can see that we have a few different steps in that. Now I just want to step it through with you. So typically when we start the ideation process, we will start with a vision. If you've actually worked through the 4DLX Grow Design Thinking Framework, you would have in phase 2 developed a vision board. For those of you who haven't worked through that process and are coming to Ideate without working through that process, there's an expectation that you have a vision. That's something that you want to achieve, and that vision could be something like, what does my life look like in 10 years time? What does my business look like in 5 years time? It could be something as simple as, how do I develop an onboarding process for my staff that is going to make them happier when they first begin here and meld into the team that they're going to be joining, so that they can start becoming a productive member of the team within the first week. For some people, it might be about developing a process. So essentially, you're going to have an objective. You're going to have a vision of what you would like to achieve, but you're faced with a situation where this is what I want. I'm just not really sure how I'm going to get there yet. And that's really where we want you to be. So you have to have a vision. Once you have a vision, the next step is you're going to have a plan to ideate. So we're going to think about, well, how do we go through an ideation session? And what we want to do is we want to teach you to fish, so you can create your own sessions. We're happy to help facilitate if that's what you would prefer, but we're here to help you lead your own teams. So you want to plan your ideation session around your vision board. So your vision must be really clear and concise. It must be easy to understand that anybody in the team or the organisation or whoever is involved in this process, whoever your stakeholders are, actually can understand your vision. So if you're not sure if it's clear, a really good way to check on that is to get somebody to tell you what they think your vision means, and you're really wanting them to understand the meaning behind the vision. And if they can articulate it back to you and you can get 4 or 5 different people to do the same, that tells you you've got a clear vision. So your vision wants to be clear and concise. So 1 or 2 sentences, really, really short, simple. What you want to do then when you're doing a plan to ideate is you're going to select an ideation tool from the Design Thinking Toolbox. And if we look over to the left-hand side of the Ideate map, we can see that we've got a couple of tools to select from. We have the table of ideas, the wall of ideas, the action matrix of ideas, and concept reduction. So what you want to do is, we know that concept reduction is phase 2. And in phase 1, we're going to either select table of ideas, wall of ideas, or action matrix of ideas. Any one of those are fine. We do have others, but we're just doing this for simplicity purposes. Then once you've selected an idea, and simply it really doesn't matter which you select, particularly the first time, I would suggest that you, as you do this on a regular basis, and I would suggest even weekly, because we've all got lots of complex problems, decisions that we need to make, stuff we're not really sure how we're going to do yet. And doing this as an activity each week is a great way to start the week. So having any one of those tools is fine to start with. You want to create some small teams to invite. So you want to think about, well, depending on what your idea is and what your vision is, You want to create all of the various stakeholders that have a stake in that idea, because you want to have diversity of opinion. You want to have different eyes on the viewpoint to give you different perspectives of how whatever it is you're trying to achieve affects them. You also want to develop rules of engagement. So how will the teams, will they engage with each other? Will there be some individuality in there? Will we get people from all different levels of the organisation? What sort of rules of engagement will we have? And we do have some suggestions on rules of engagement in the design thinking box. So if you haven't done this before, you're not really sure what to look for, have a look at the rules of engagement cards in the design thinking box. You also want to determine who's going to facilitate. So are you going to get a professional facilitator? Are you going to get a design thinking facilitator? Are you going to facilitate yourself, or are you going to get somebody that's not personally involved in whatever the vision is to be the facilitator? So any of those options are fine, but whoever the facilitator is, their job is to facilitate and not to participate as an active participator in the idea or the ideation phase of trying to generate ideas and concepts to address the vision. You want to decide where you're going to be holding the session. Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be in a physical space? Is it going to be a blending of the two? And again, a lot of that will determine on what you have available and where your team or stakeholder members are located. So sometimes they're located across the globe. Sometimes they're located in different environments across the state, the country. It could be you going through, a COVID shutdown or something, so everybody's working from home. There's a whole range of different possibilities that can happen. Once you've worked out what your plan is to create the IDA session, you want to, on the day itself, you want to arrive early, you want to be prepared, refreshed, have slept well the night before, had plenty of water to drink, so that you're really on top of your game. You want to check your technology is working. There's nothing worse than having technology that's not working properly and you waste really valuable time when you should be in the process of ideation, trying to work out if anybody can hear you, how do we share a screen, all those kinds of things. You also want to share the vision with everybody so that everyone is really clear on the vision that you're trying to achieve. Again, I personally suggest sharing your vision, sharing your rules for engagement, sharing how the teams will move about, morph and change if that's what's in your rules of engagement, and sharing the agenda beforehand. That's my personal preference. I get that's not everyone's preference and everybody has different reasons for that. And there are different ways of doing things and that is fine. But you need to have a clear picture about when you're going to be sharing them. I typically like to share those things 2 to 3 days beforehand, if not day before. I like to give people time to read, and the reality is life gets in the way. And sometimes things happen at home and people don't get the time to read things that they thought they were going to get the time to do because, things happen. When we actually look at day of on the day, so again, pop over to the left-hand side. There's a number of ways that we can do this. And again, depending on which tool you choose, I personally my personal preference is 4 rounds of 30 minutes of ideation, 12 years of doing this. And to be honest, I've done it multiple different ways, different time areas. I remember I've done it across weekends, I've done it across weeks, I've done it night sessions, I've done day sessions, I've done half days, full days, and seriously, 4 rounds of 30 minutes I find to be the most effective. I personally have a preference for 15-minute breaks between each session, and I like to give people different things to do within those 15-minute breaks. So I will even create activities for those 15-minute breaks. What those activities look like will actually depend on where the people are located, whether we're talking about a virtual session versus everybody's in the same room. So if everyone's in the same room, often I'll get us to do some exercises. For part of that 15 minutes, we might just do a 5-minute quick exercise routine and then allow people to go the other 10 minutes to go and grab a coffee, go to the toilet, all that kind of stuff. If I'm in a virtual situation, again, sometimes we'll just do a virtual exercise. You could do, you know, a quick thing virtually like that, and then again give people 5-10 minutes to go grab a coffee, go to the toilet, etc. Sometimes people need to check on children, make a phone call, and that's fine, because while we're in the sessions, I want to be really clear that you are committed to the session. You have got all your media's turned off, your distractions are off, you're in the session. I also like to allocate a 15-minute break, an introduction section on how we're going to plan to run the day. Even though they've been given the agenda beforehand, I just like to just briefly do that. Usually it's less than 15 minutes, just to double check if are there any questions that somebody's not really quite understanding, or to be honest, or they may not have had the opportunity to read the materials. I also like to give a debrief at the end, and I'm pretty clear on that, you know, I think we all need a debrief at the end, and so that's typically does go for 15 minutes. So when we actually run the ideation session itself, we follow the guide. So every tool in the toolbox is a guideline, which means that here's a guideline, what we want you to do, this is how we suggest you run it. And there is a preference that you do run it in this way, but there's also, because it's a guideline, sometimes it can be sets of circumstances, it can be different types of people, it could be the type of vision it is, the company, a set of circumstances, that sometimes requires a slight deviation. So I believe in flexibility, I believe in guidelines, I believe that sometimes we need to move the goalposts, or we need to move things, and there are reasons for that. So as long as you've got reasons for making some changes, that's fine. We really encourage people to think big, and if you've never done this before, or you're still new to design thinking, it is scary stuff, thinking big, and sometimes some people can do it just because they're natural at it. In my experience, most of us are not natural at it, and it takes over and over and over and again. And this is where I personally believe design thinking is like a superpower to a leader and the leader's team that uses it. It's like going and putting on a big super cape, because what happens is when used with regularity, and I've worked with teams where we've introduced as a Monday thing or a Tuesday thing. Often I personally prefer a Tuesday as opposed to a Monday, but either is fine. What happens is, as people get used to the process of design thinking, they get used to the process of, and they just find ideas start to flow, and they go bang, 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 and they smash them out. And what happens when they smash them out? Their ideas start to get bigger and more audacious and more crazy and more hairy. And as people start to let go of this notion of feeling that somebody's going to judge them for their idea, because one of the major rules of engagement, there is no judgment. We do not judge any ideas until we move to the concept reduction stage, and that's when we do our judgy stuff. So when we go to no more than 30 minutes, I do say guidelines, and I know some people will go to 45. Some people I've seen go for an hour. I've even seen one group go for 2 hours. But to be honest, you've got to think about the people in the room. You've got to think about your objective. And the reality is generating new ideas and thinking is, you're doing your mind work. So it's really heavy mind lifting work. It's going to be tiring. And if you've never done it before, it's massively tiring. So 30 minutes max. Seriously, you know, you might want to even crunch it back to 20 minutes if your team's very new to this. On day 2, so back over to the right-hand side, is concept reduction. I do not recommend doing concept reduction on the same day. I've seen it done many, many times over the years. And to be honest, when I look at the times when people have done it on the same day, like a lot of people would do morning session, let's do an ideation, and then do it in the afternoon. Seriously, it's just never worked. I have seen much bigger successes when it's been done on a different day, and not even the following day, typically a couple of days later. But you don't want to leave it too long, and you certainly don't want to leave it more than a week. I have a personal preference where we ideate on Tuesday and we do concept reduction on a Thursday. That's just a personal preference. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's just where I've seen probably the most success in my time. Just a quick rundown on concept reduction. Again, it's a really simple tool. And again, that's done in rounds. It's done as a process, and we typically allocate about 2 hours. And in that 2 hours, we'll go through the introduction of what we plan to do for the day. We'll go through the theming stage where we'll theme the concepts into 3 themes, 4 themes, 5 themes, depending on what we're actually trying to achieve. We'll then move from the theming stage to the unique identifier stage, which is where we start to reduce the concepts that are essentially saying the same thing. So we're looking for understanding of what those concepts mean. And if they're saying the same thing, then we group them together, and there might be 4 or 5 concepts. This is really, really common. And we go, well, essentially, they're kind of all saying this. What's another way we can take these 4 or 5 ideas and turn them into a concept, and what would that concept look like? And that's where some of the real high value stuff happens in this idea reduction section. So once we start to reduce it down to our unique identifier stage, we then want to reduce it down further by going through a rating and ranking stage. So what we will do is there's a scorecard, and you can see the scorecard as part of the ideation process, and it's in the concept reduction bit. You want to get a scorecard, and you want to then adjust the scorecard for your particular set of circumstances, and you want to then give every single idea that's left, and hopefully there's less than 10 left by this stage. Every idea that's left, you want to give it a score on feasibility, viability, and desirability, and what underpins those. You then will total up those scores. So each idea, or by this stage we should be talking about concepts, each concept will then have a score. And then once each concept has a score from the rating system, we will then rank those scores. And so we'll have like first, second, third, fourth, etc. And prior to this process, we would have asked the leader, how many ideas do you want to progress to the prototyping stage? And most leaders will tell us 1 to 5. We end up getting probably about 3 is probably the most common number, but typically 1 to 5 is the answer. And which get progressed will depend on time, money, effort, energy, resources, staffing, all kinds of things. Technology availability, there's a whole range of things. And we'll have a number. and we'll rank it down. We'll rank it down to, you know, if they've got 3, well, that's what we're going to end up with. And then again, we'll have a debriefing stage, which will finish off what we did in the day, and then how do we move this forward to the prototyping stage, which is the next phase within the D for design stage of the 4DLX Grow Design Thinking Framework. Thank you.